Hello and welcome to Retro Reviews, my channel where I review my favorite retro video games of all time as well as some modern releases I have recently finished. I know Halloween was yesterday, but I wanted to get on here and talk about my 10 of my favorite horror games. I want to make the distinction clear here. I'm talking about true horror experiences, so if it's a mix of those things, but could be considered an action game, could be considered like an adventure game, I want to steer away from those a little bit and focus on stuff that I feel like is definitely more horror focused. There might be one or two on this list that you might say that's not really a horror game, and feel free to let me know in the comment section down below. In fact, I would like to do a follow-up video to this one based on your comments and my other favorite horror games. So this is not an exhaustive list by any means. These are just 10 of the ones that I really enjoy, that I have enjoyed over the years. There will definitely be like repeats from franchises or multiple entries from certain franchises since they are horror staples, but I will be excluding a few. Some honorable mentions include Resident Evil 4. Now the remake could be considered more of a horror game than the original one, but for me it still feels more like an action and survival horror type thing. It feels much less scary than, say, some of the other entries in the Resident Evil franchise in particular that I'll be talking about on this list. So you could definitely argue Resident Evil 4 is a horror game. There are definitely some terrifying moments, some that gave me nightmares as a kid, like Regenerators, but I think on the whole it feels more of an action game. Same with Resident Evil 3, even Resident Evil 8 to some degree. So those are some of the honorable mentions there. Other ones include like Silent Hill 2, because I haven't played it, or any of the other Silent Hill games. That's one that definitely will be left off my list that should be on here, but since I haven't played them, I can't really talk to them. Same with Alan Wake 2. I have not gotten around to playing that one quite yet. I have heard it's one of the best horror experiences because of how much it defies a lot of the horror aspects of the genre, so that's a whole other thing. And same with The Evil Within. I just have not gotten around to playing with it. So if you have your favorites, please let them know in the comment section down below. With that out of the way, let's get on to the list here. I'm not going to be, these aren't like specifically in order here. They're not like in order from 10 to 1, but I'm going to display them that way. Anyway, let's get into the list. Number 10 is going to be The Walking Dead Season 1. This one definitely could fall under the narrative genre, like walking simulator type thing, choose your own adventure type category. But I feel like this season specifically, and the way that Telltale presents it, definitely feels very like horror focused. There are so many moments in this game that really made my heart pound, and like my decision making and everything, just it left me in shambles. This game definitely feels like a horror experience to me, and it's in such an interesting way as well, because there are those visual novel aspects, and you're making lots of choices. There are definitely times when it doesn't feel like a horror game, but when it hits exceptionally hard. For me, that's why it earns its spot on this list. This is also one of the most emotional like horror games I've ever played. It leaves a huge impact. I think season 1 especially, they never were able to top it. They did some great stuff with season 2 and season 3 and down the line, but nothing beats season 1 for me. Number 9 is going to be Inside. This is another one that you could maybe argue isn't quite a horror game, but I think this and Limbo definitely fall under that category. I think Inside to some further extent because of how many dark themes and some of like the violent deaths animations and everything. I just think it's an incredibly dark and very terrifying game in a lot of ways. I think especially at the end with like the big blob of people, I think that's a pretty terrifying moment. The mind control moments, like the not understanding like what's real and what's like being like puppeted behind the scenes. It's just a very like cerebral horror game for me, and one that left a lasting impact as well. This is one of my favorite indie games of all time by a long shot. It's so much fun to play, but it's also really terrifying. Number 8 is going to be Little Nightmares. This one obviously is a horror game by every metric. This is one of the scariest experiences I had playing it on the Switch. I remember getting it on sale one day and hearing lots of good things about it, and absolutely like having so many jump scares, really like hating this game because it was so scary. There were so many moments that really got me. I think toward the end, especially when you're running from these giant fat blob monster people, like it's absolutely horrendous. There's so many things that scream, stop playing this game, put it down, run away forever. This is a huge horror experience that I think more people should play. I have not played Little Nightmares 2 yet, but I hear that's even better. There are like some DLC stuff that I haven't finished on Little Nightmares 1, but I thoroughly enjoyed the original experience enough to remember it this vividly and put it on my list here. Number 7 is going to be Alien Isolation. This game, I remember this game came out and like IGN gave it like a 6.7 or something, like a way too low score for a game that got critically praised by pretty much everybody that's a fan of the Alien franchise and by people who played the game at all. It seems like the reviewers just, I don't know, just didn't do their research enough. This game is not only terrifying, but terrifying because the AI is so intelligent. I have like read up all about the AI at certain points. I've heard like lots of stories about it, how it has like different modes that it goes into to find you. It really is a terrifying experience to play this game because you never know when you're safe. That's one of the pitfalls of horror games, and especially like some earlier ones, is that once you figure out the system, you can exploit it to your advantage. You can get away from the scares to some degree, but this game really has to keep you on your toes at all times. It's insanely difficult to actually beat this game because of how intelligent the AI is, and that makes the scares that much scarier. Number 6 is going to be Resident Evil 7. I remember so vividly one day, I was in my apartment in college. It was like the middle of the day. I had come home from class, I had some extra time, I didn't have to work that day, and so I was playing Resident Evil 7. In broad daylight, I had my window open to get a breeze in, and I was at a particularly stressful point, and my wife came to the window, just said hello, very pleasantly, not trying to scare me, didn't know what I was doing. I jumped so hard. I was that invested and that terrified playing through this game. I have not played it fully in VR. I have experienced it in VR, and it is infinitely more terrifying. This really brought back the scares to Resident Evil for me in such a major way. It still has like scars in my brain because of how terrifying this experience really is. I love that, and I hope Resident Evil 9 goes back to that a little bit more, because Resident Evil 8 was very scary, and some of the scariest parts, and like especially the first half of the game, but it didn't hit the highs that Resident Evil 7 had for me, and that's why it's not on this list. Number 5 is going to be Outlast. This game does suffer from the thing I said previously about learning the systems and such and being able to exploit it. This game has a lot of times where you just feel like you have absolutely no chance at surviving, and that is really, really terrifying. I booted up this game. I got it on sale at Halloween one year, I think 3 or 4 years ago. I was like, you know what, I'm going to try out this game. I've heard about it. I know how terrifying it is in some of these cutscenes. I'm going to try it. I got it for like $1.50. I booted it up, and I turned it off after about half an hour. I was like, nope. Absolutely not playing this. And I kept coming back to it, knowing that I hated it. I hated this game so much, but I kept coming back to it because I needed to prove to myself that I could beat this game. And it was a horrifying experience. The helplessness that the game presents you with, having like a camera and you have to charge it with batteries to give yourself light, how horrifying these like monster people are that chase you, some of the like boss encounters, if you can call them that, are absolutely horrendous. I have not played Outlast 2 because I barely got through Outlast 1, but I have heard that the scares in that game are exceptionally terrifying as well. So yeah, Outlast is one of those games that really puts the focus on terror because it makes you feel so helpless. Number 4 is going to be another game that makes you feel that way, with Amnesia: The Dark Descent. This one is really interesting because it's much older than something like Outlast or these other games on my list, but it does such a good job of instilling terror into you without having to do nearly as much footwork. It like sets up the game in such a way that really makes you feel unsafe at every single turn. There's no point that you feel like you have safety in this game. I remember so vividly the first time I experienced the water monster as well, and jumping between boxes. That is some of the scariest like a video game has ever been for me. Walking through the water and having that terror after you and hearing the footsteps, that is so horrifying. The fact that you're in the dark a lot and your sanity meter can go down and make you see, like, all of the systems that bring this game together just play with your mind in such incredible ways. It feels very reminiscent of something like Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem. Can't remember which one came out first. I have not finished that one either. I remember my brother playing it, but I never got around to touching that one. But it does feel like the same kind of vein here with the sanity effects and making you question what's actually going on and what you need to be afraid of. And I think that's a really powerful thing in a horror game. Number 3 is going to be Dead Space. You can use the original or the remake. I think they're both absolutely horrifying. The remake definitely feels scarier in a lot of ways because of the upgraded visuals and how they make everything really dark and dingy. And oh my goodness, this game really gives me the creeps. And that's why I love it. It's really fantastic at doing the scares right. You don't feel safe. Again, like taking the safety away from the player, making you feel like you have to be on your toes at all times. You can't go up to a save point without making sure that you have cleared the necromorphs behind you. I had that point in the remake where I went to a safe spot, heard something tearing after me, and I went, no, I can't exit out of this fast enough. And the way that the things grab you out of the walls and you never know when it's going to happen. But the way that, like, going into a vacuum and not knowing if a necromorph is behind you, or necromorph is behind you. The way that they do scares in the Dead Space franchise is just so superb. They really take away your feeling of safety. Even if you have weapons fully stocked with ammo, you don't ever feel safe in this game. That leads me to number 2, which is going to be Dead Space 2. One of the few times I've ever put back-to-back entries from a same franchise in a list. But Dead Space 2 does everything I love about Dead Space 1, like, turned up an extra degree. This game made the scares even worse for me. I still remember it. It's been a long time since I've played Dead Space 2, but I have very visceral feelings about this game and remembering how horrifying this game really is. They just stepped it up. Everything that Dead Space 1 did well, they stepped it up in Dead Space 2. The scares were better, the encounters were better, and like some of the cutscenes, like putting the needle in Isaac's eye is one of the most horrifying things I have ever had to do. And I succeeded on my first go. I was so pinpoint precise. I did not want to see. I had heard the horror stories of the missing and getting the death animation there, and I was not about to see it, and it still freaked me out because putting a needle in someone's eye is always going to freak you out. Absolutely horrifying experience. But that's going to lead me to number 1, which is going to be Resident Evil 2. And I'm going to specifically talk about the remake. The original one is also very terrifying, but I think the number 2 does it even, the 2 remake does it even better than the first one does. It's just so powerful. The way that they set this game up and the way that they marketed it just really did a number for how like terrifying this game was going to be. I could tell from the trailers this was going to be a terrifying experience, that they were going to take everything that made Resident Evil 2 scary when it launched and crank it up to 11 because of the upgraded visuals and the way that enemy AI can work. Again, this is one of those games that in the earlier days, if you figure out the systems, you figure out how an enemy AI works, you can get around them fairly easily. You definitely can do that in the newer Resident Evil games, and the remakes especially, but it definitely feels a lot harder to do. I felt like I could not shake zombies to save my life, and they were really hard to hit. I had to conserve my ammo much harder than I ever have in any other Resident Evil game. It just did everything to make me feel helpless and hopeless in the situation. Pair that with Mr. X coming after you, it's a terrifying cacophony. I love the way that they script some of the really terrifying moments, the way they put you in narrow corridors, the way they put you in like situations where you feel like, oh, I should be safe here, but you absolutely aren't. I think they just did a masterful execution here of making this one of the scariest Resident Evil experiences of all time. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think, what games I definitely have missed out on, games that you think should be on this list. I would love to do a follow-up in the future. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.